Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about a number of specific Hindu grievances which incidentally were not addressed at all by the supposed Hindu government which existed between 1998 and 2004. You see, there was a BJP government that had signed up to a Hindu agenda, which will include some of the points I will present here, and which didn't do anything when it was in power. It has used the excuse, if at all, on those occasions at all when it had to justify itself, that of course it did not have a real majority. It was a coalition. Many of its coalition partners would not go all the way. And even with a majority, they would not have the two-thirds majority to change the constitution when that was necessary. So they just did nothing and felt good about it. Now, even in that situation, it was possible to do something. Like, for instance, tabling a proposition of law and see it defeated. Because then at least everybody has voted on it, everybody has said clearly where he stands. And then you can wage the next election campaign precisely on those themes. Even that they didn't do. So for a future BJP or otherwise Hindu-minded government, here are a few things to do. Now let us first discuss a few things which should not be done, which are on quite a few Hindu activists' agenda, but which it would be a bad idea to implement in law. One thing that one sees very, very regularly is, all this will be solved if India is declared a Hindu state. Well, you see, Nepal was a Hindu state for so many years, and you know, what has it achieved? And how Hindu was it anyway? Of Nepal I heard for the first time when I was a student in Varanasi 25 years ago, and it didn't seem very good. The students said, you see, the Hindu character of the state is decreasing, and ever since, you see, I've followed the news about Nepal, and I've never heard anything positive from the Hindu viewpoint. Like, for example, at one point, some guerrilla groups demanded the abolition of Sanskrit as a course in school, and the king simply gave in. The course was abolished. So more and more, you see, the Hindu character of the state was eroded. And then finally, the palace revolution happened, a very ignominious affair, not really something for a Hindu state to be proud of. Still, you see, what Hindus kept on clamoring for a Hindu state identified it completely with the royal dynasty, the Hindu kingdom of Nepal, when in fact, Hindu state could be anything. There is no reason specifically for having a royalty there. And then, of course, the Hindu state was defeated altogether, and now there is no more talk of it. The last I read was that there is a majority of Nepalis who would want a so-called Hindu democracy rather than a secular democracy, but the present Constituent Assembly will probably not give it to them. I mean, the first sign of democracy is that this majority wish for a Hindu democracy, whatever it may be, that it is implemented. Well, this already will not happen. Now, it makes no difference really, because it's only a word. And a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. So if you have a real Hindu state without calling it a Hindu state, would be just as well as the label Hindu state. All you can achieve by clamoring for a Hindu state is that you will create more enemies. You see, more Hindus, Christians and so on, and especially foreign public opinion will be disposed very negatively towards the Hindu movement if it claims for a Hindu state, because they associate this with a Muslim state as exists in Saudi Arabia, in Pakistan and so on. And you see, they do not see really the difference. They do not see the history of Hindu states, which were very tolerant and pluralistic states. So nothing really is achieved except that you make many enemies. You see, it is a typical example of the Hindu tendency to mistake a word for a fact. So you should absolutely not waste time on this declaration of India as a Hindu state. Then the matter of conversions. You see, already since Mahatma Gandhi, Hindus have protested against the Christian missionaries' practice of conversion, saying that it creates endless social problems. In tribal communities, for instance, religion is closely bound up with the whole social life. There is no clear distinction between the religious sphere and all the rest. This is a modern Christian, post-Christian concept of religion as a private affair. Now, the missionaries who are active there are very often fundamentalist evangelicals, for whom anything except Christianity is devil worship and is absolutely to be shunned. So therefore, tribals who convert to Christianity will boycott social life as a whole, because it is all tainted with devil worship. So tribal communities are split down the middle by conversion. This is not I who say it. Already since Mahatma Gandhi, observers have said it. Okay, this is a problem, but legislating that conversion should be forbidden, like it was theoretically forbidden in Nepal, or like it still is legally forbidden in Israel, in Burma, in China, for instance, that would not help. You see, among other things, it's not the right thing to do. You see, all this whole repressive approach of prohibiting things is something I don't feel comfortable with. And anyway, it's something that doesn't work. In China, conversion may be forbidden, but it is one of the favorite hunting grounds of the Christian missionaries. You see, they have a whole arsenal of techniques of secretly operating under different guises, with different kinds of passports, but not as missionaries. And so they are making a big number of converts, in spite of the legal ban. Indeed, for Christians, legal bans are powerless. You see, they have a whole experience for 2,000 years with contravening and circumventing such bans. You see, Christianity has classically operated in difficult circumstances as an opposition. You see, they have survived communism. They have more or less survived many Islamic regimes. So in this case too, they would easily survive such a ban. Moreover, such a ban would normally in India not have teeth. You see, in several states there exist freedom of religion laws, which do not, as Christian propagandists outside India claim, do not ban conversions, but simply very mildly ask people when they convert to have the conversion registered with a judge. Now, even this very mild law is not being implemented. And so there is no effective legal ban on conversions. There is not even any enforcement of this very mild requirement of having conversions legally registered. So if this law is already ineffective, a ban would be even more ineffective. So don't waste your time on clamoring for a ban on conversions. You know, it is un-Hindu and it doesn't work. It's also undemocratic. It's many things that we don't want, and so a different solution will have to be found. At any rate, conversions are a problem of religion and should be dealt with at that level. People should be convinced that Hinduism as a religion works and that there is no reason to convert to Christianity. And if you can't do that, well, okay, then you have a problem, but this legal ban is not the solution. Then there is the issue of the Common Civil Code. It has been on the BJP's agenda since its beginning, and it is par excellence a secular demand. You see, foreigners always write, specialists, India watchers. You see, they always write that India's secularism is threatened by the Hindu nationalist BJP. Now, India does not have a secular fabric. You see, India by definition is not a secular state at all. In secular states, one of the defining characteristics is that all citizens are equal before the law, regardless of religion. Now in India this is not the case, because there are different personal laws depending on whether you are a Muslim, a Christian, a Parsi or a Hindu. So to abolish this system of separate civil codes is a secular demand. Indeed, the BJP partly makes this demand to look secular, because it is a secular demand par excellence. And if Congress and the communists and others oppose this, it proves that they are not secular. So it's a secular demand. It is not so much a Hindu demand. You see, traditionally, Hindu society has had many civil codes. You see, caste-wise, Brahmins had different customs within their caste than Reddis or Jats or other castes. You see, every caste was a nation and had its own system of laws. So traditionally, already the creation of a common Hindu code, which materialized in law in the 1950s, was already a revolutionary step. And so with this background, Hindus are fairly comfortable with the existence of several civil codes. You see, from a Hindu viewpoint, this is not very much a problem. But once Hindus have to conform to the idea that India is a secular state, then it becomes a problem, because these separate civil codes are precisely not a secular feature. So from a secular angle, this law really deserves to be changed. It is in conformity with the Constitution, which recommends the creation of a common civil code. The Supreme Court has also demanded that the government report on its steps towards creating a common civil code. So it's a fair demand par excellence. On the other hand, the BJP or any other Hindu party should not invest too much energy in it, because this is an issue with which little is gained and much can be lost. You see, it is an issue fairly sure to cause bloodshed. You see, there will be very massive, especially Muslim demonstrations against it, for the preservation of Sharia law. And perhaps this should be confronted head-on at some point, maybe so, but you see, there are other priorities that are more important. Then there is the question of Article 370, which gives a separate status to the state of Kashmir. And less known is that Articles 371 and 372 give a similar separate status to Nagaland and Mizoram, which are all three states with a non-Hindu majority, which secularists assure us is pure coincidence. At any rate, this is a nationalist demand, which makes fairly little difference to the daily life of Hindus, but to those who are concerned with the Indian state, it is something that should be done. And yes, it is indeed something that should be done. Kashmir should just become a normal state. Other Indians should have the freedom to settle in Kashmir. Indeed, that would be part of the solution. So this is a fair demand. You see, again, anti-national elements are sure to create violence against it, but then the problem of religious violence is already there. The Muslim masses of India would not be so much affected by it. The Muslim masses of Kashmir, yes, but elsewhere in India, they would feel the pressure to prove that they are Indian patriots, that they are not anti-India, and that therefore they do not perforce show any attachment to the Article 370. So you see, again, Article 370 should be abolished. You see, this is a fair demand to make. You know, you should have it on your agenda. Again, it is not an urgent priority. You see, it should be there. It's okay, but there are more pressing points. And so now we will address those. There is the matter of the status of temples, about which a conference was held by Swami Dayanand Saraswati and with the Hindu Dharma Acharya Sabha, the conference of Swamis. And the problem is this, that while churches and mosques cannot be touched by the state, Hindu temples routinely are. You see, their governing boards are systematically intruded upon by the state governments, which have a statutory right to be present in the government of temples. Their money especially, and this is really what concerns the state, their money is systematically looted. So if you go to the temple and you donate money to the deity of the temple, in fact you are donating part of your money to the state who will use it to finance churches and mosques or for other purposes. And of course, in India, much of the money disappears into deep pockets of corrupt politicians. So this is what you are financing when you think you are financing temples, or when you are donating money to the deity. So there, and there are different legal aspects to this, which I will not go too deeply into, but at any rate, this is a situation that should be remedied. And this is very urgent, and this is very important. You see, in a secular state, all religious establishments should be treated on a par, should be treated equally. So this equality, and nobody can object to it, this equality should be instituted in law. So Hindus should be freed from these state controls. Or if state controls are imposed, they should be imposed equally on temples, on churches, and on mosques. So this is a very simple issue, and nobody can seriously object to it. Well, of course, the secularists are sure to object to it, are sure to invent all kinds of specious reasons, but then it is our job to counter those. Finally, there is the matter of Article 30 of the Constitution, which says that minority educational institutes institutions can, of course, exist and can be subsidized by the state, which is interpreted as meaning that minority institutions can and majority institutions cannot. In fact, strictly speaking, the article says nothing about the majority. It confers rights upon the minorities while not saying anything about the majority. And I am convinced that many in the Constituent Assembly who voted for this article were not aware that they were creating a discrimination against the majority. They assumed that, of course, the majority would enjoy the rights that were being conferred on the minorities. Now, this proved to be not the case. As you know, in the 1990s, several Hindu organizations, the Arya Samaj, the Ramakrishna Mission, have gone to court to demand recognition as a non-Hindu minority, precisely because they wanted to preserve their network of schools from state interference, which they could do as a religious minority and not as a Hindu organization. So there is a certain uncertainty about the exact meaning of the text, which has been effectively resolved to the disadvantage of the Hindus. It has been assumed that the article confers rights on the minorities, which it denies to the Hindus. Now, this is an obvious inequality, a very unsecular inequality, a discrimination between religions, and this should be abolished. And this should be really number one on the agenda of any Hindu government. You see, you should absolutely judge the performance of an Narendra Modi or whoever it is that comes to power through a Hindu constituency, and you should judge them by their performance regarding this Article 30. Now, this need not be a very difficult issue. It is a thing that does not concern the minorities directly. So you should not take into account too much the possibility of an armed uprising or something, riots in the street. You know, this does not really affect the minorities. The secularists, of course, are again bound to find specious reasons, and those can be countered. And then it is a demand of secularism. You see, the secular state has absolutely no business in discriminating between religions. Now, in this case, you could perhaps find a two-thirds majority to alter the article of the Constitution, but it could be even simpler. The Supreme Court could be approached for a correct and definitive interpretation of this article. Perhaps this article does not mean what it has been taken to mean. Perhaps it does not deny rights to the majority. It confers upon the majority equal rights with the minorities. And therefore Hindu schools can function, can be subsidized by the state, just as Christian or Muslim schools. So this is a possibility. And otherwise, you have to follow the long route and change the Constitution. In this case, if you properly prepare it, if you talk with the other parties, very likely a two-thirds majority can be found. If it cannot be found, well then at least everybody has said where he stands. The parties who are opposed to legal equality have said so clearly, and then you can name them and shame them, and you can have the next electoral campaign precisely on this theme. So these are a few things for a pro-Hindu or indeed a secular government to do. It's being put to me that the constitutional right to propagation of religion does not imply the right of conversion. Well, this is being nice about words. I don't think it makes much difference, and effectively, you see, the borderline is not clear, and when somebody wants to convert, you know, of course, in many cases it will be due to propagation, but to draw the line between, you see, the propagation was permitted, but the conversion is not, that is not going to work. You see, you can theoretically say, yes, you know, propagation is allowed, conversion is not, but this will not work. And those who are in the business of conversion are sure to protest against it. They will, of course, misrepresent it. They will say it is an attack on freedom of religion and so on. So again, you know, by changing the words, you're going to make a lot of enemies, and you're not going to gain anything on the ground. Of course, in certain specific circumstances, you can put a curb on conversions. For example, conversions of minors through Christian schools, for example, or on the street. You see, that kind of propaganda can perhaps be curtailed. But generally speaking, of course, people have a right to convert. And therefore, you see, the conversion-minded forces are very, very, very sure to make noise about this. And it's not going to make a political difference anyway. So I wouldn't invest in it. I would simply accept the fact that conversions exist, and then, you see, get your act together and make sure people don't convert or convert towards Hinduism. Not that you should propagate your religion, go out on the street and, you see, distribute pamphlets advertising your religion. But you see, if it just happens, well, then it happens. So it's a defensive measure. It's as if, you see, Hinduism is besieged, and in some respects, indeed, it is besieged. But you see, here in this case, well, it's just a defensive posture you strike, which could just as well be turned into an offensive posture, or at least in a more relaxed posture. You see, if Hinduism is being besieged, it is because it is not doing what it could do. It is not getting its act together. It's not performing sufficiently well. And Hindus are not conscious enough of what is at stake. And of course, this is an acute problem now more than ever, because of the rampant consumerism that exists now, the Americanization. So you see, people are just drunk on their prosperity and are not thinking about serious issues. You know, as soon as the revelry about the newfound prosperity is over, perhaps they will become more serious again. But at any rate, you see, now this exists. People are not conscious, are forgetting themselves in useless pursuits. This is very true. And so Hindus have that problem of a lack of Hindu consciousness. But that is precisely something that Hindu organizations should address, rather than fighting useless battles over changing the constitution. Well, nowadays I would be careful that certain privileges are not being instituted for the minorities. In that sense, the West is becoming more and more like India. But so far, this legal discrimination does not exist. Yes, you see it regularly. Even the hoisting of the Indian flag on the central square of Srinagar has already become a controversial act. The singing of Vande Mataram, which was already controversial at the time of the Congress during the freedom movement, very controversial today. And I'm sure that other symbolic issues could be found. But it just shows the general anti-Hindu climate, and especially some committed Muslims make an issue out of it. saying, for example, that Vande Mataram is a form of idolatry. You know, it's a song for the goddess Durga. Whether you name her or not, this is really what it is. And this is what it originally was meant as. So Mother India, you see, as a goddess, you know, is being identified with the traditional Hindu goddesses. So in this respect, Hinduism is very congenial with the you know, veneration of India as a goddess. You know, the earth goddess, the motherland, and so on. Concepts which do not exist, or which certainly have no religious meaning in the case of Islam or Christianity. So yes, they have a point. In that respect, you could say that Hinduism is naturally nationalist, while Islam and Christianity are not. You could certainly argue that. Yeah. Yes, the concept of self-alienation, and specifically of the self-alienated Hindu, is entirely related to Article 30, because the limitations on the existence of Hindu schools is linked to the lack of Hindu education. And so, you see, Hindus traditionally drink in the Hindu culture through their surroundings. Many people were not going to schools. They were not learning there's Hinduism in school, but they were learning it everywhere. Today the atmosphere is becoming less and less Hindu. And indeed, Hindus are bombarded with subtle anti-Hindu propaganda, for example, through Bollywood movies. So, in the modern world, instilling some knowledge of Hindu tradition through education would be a very good and very important thing. And it is true that right now, Hindus are less and less conscious of their tradition. The secularists, of course, are the paragon of this. You see, secularists should be treated as foreign tourists who have vaguely read a little booklet about India, and then you see that constitutes the whole of their knowledge. So they make all kinds of wild statements, effectively treating Hinduism on a par with Christianity, because you see the Western tourists' paradigm of religion is formed by their Christian upbringing, and so they project that onto all other religions, also on Hinduism. You know, so therefore, I mean, they are fully alienated from their roots. Thank you.